Hey, I'm in Shenzhen, China, which is probably the world's most high-tech city today. I spent about a week here checking out all the tech from food delivery via drones to insane high-speed rail, autonomous police robots, the most futuristic cars, and more. I also used to live here and I still have a bunch of good friends, so I asked them what all this tech actually feels like as a resident. Is it a techno-utopia, a techno-dystopia, or maybe both? Let's find out. This video was sponsored by Insta360. My journey to Shenzhen started in this gorgeous train station because of course I'll be arriving from Hong Kong to Shenzhen via what else but a high-speed train. Obviously you have a fast rail service, 185 kilometers an hour from city center to city center in 14 minutes, 1-4. How do you do that? By putting the whole thing completely into a tunnel, completely underground, can't see anything. On the Shenzhen side, there are platform screen doors to keep the wind from sucking you in the tunnel as one of these speeds by, and I gotta say, an express train to the city center is the best way to arrive to a place in my opinion. Okay, after the train we went to our hotel, and of course we took a metro for that. This was Metro Line 1, which was the only line that was properly finished when I first lived here in 2007, but things have very much changed since. Now this is the metro network right now, if I'm counting this correctly. I think they have something like 16 proper lines right now. And that means they build one new line almost every year. Crazy. Indeed, the build-out of the metro system has been absolutely staggering, and that shows in many of the stations too. We are at Gangsha North Station, which is their newest and most modern metro station. There are, I think, 4 lines crossing here, and these look incredibly modern. Most of the other stations look much more plain than this, but this one's really cool as you can see all the trains crisscrossing in their little transparent tubes. A couple more metro fun facts is that you can now first of all choose if you want to have a car with a colder AC or one with more moderate temperatures, which is nice. Then I also realized that Baidu Maps will actually automatically recognize which station you're at, and it will update that on your phone as you've just seen. And finally, I also encountered this slightly bizarre thing at Gangsha. This is the next generation gate that you exit the subway from. You can either tap your card as normal or you can do face recognition. I guess it's not really a choice because it's going to try to recognize your face even if you don't have it set up. Kind of futuristic, kind of creepy. Now, sticking with public transportation for a while, I really like Shenzhen's buses, in large part because this was the first big city in the world that embraced fully electric city buses in 2018, and as a result, they're now super quiet. Oh man, that is so nice. These used to be so loud and smelly, and now they just aren't. And also completely electrified were all the official taxis by 2018 along with the buses. These BYDs aren't like super premium or anything, and private ride-hailing drivers can drive whatever they want, including gas cars, but none of the ride-hailing drivers that picked me up in the whole week drove anything other than electric. Given that EVs in China are already cheaper than their ICE counterparts and still falling in their prices, I think that makes a lot of sense. But even more futuristic is that Shenzhen actually also has robotaxis from 3 different local companies. I managed to try one from a company called Pony AI, and ours had a safety driver in it. He didn't actually control the car, but he was seemingly there to just intervene if something happened. This car was surprisingly a Lexus hybrid, so not a Chinese EV, which is what I would have expected, but yeah, the car itself drove pretty well. It's kind of weird how uneventful robotaxi rides feel when they actually happen. I'm guessing that these Chinese firms are a tiny bit behind what Waymo, for example, can do in the US, because you can actually only order them in a few small districts in the city, which are newly built and have particularly easy to navigate streets, plus from what I can tell, about half of them have safety drivers. Still, the Chinese firms are clearly developing the technology, and funnily enough, the Pony AI car that I tried was from a company called Tencent, which the US government has just designated as a Chinese military company, so technically I guess that means I've ridden a Chinese military vehicle now. Cool. Now, actually getting a robotaxi was rather frustrating. 4 times in a row we waited for about an hour or so just to have our order cancelled, and the locals said that that's apparently because the taxi drivers are angry and they're trying to sabotage the current network by placing many fake orders. Clearly not everyone is happy about losing their jobs to robots even in China, which is especially understandable because the country's economy right now is in a pretty terrible shape and unemployment is very high. And continuing with automation, we saw a surprising number of other robots too. There was this self-driving bus, which I didn't manage to get on sadly, but it also seems to be in early testing in about the same area as the robotaxis. And there's also, for example, this street cleaning bot. It was seemingly fully autonomous and it was just riding around doing robot stuff. But perhaps the most bizarre machines were these police robots, which we saw quite a few of in some of the pedestrianized areas. This one appeared to be fully autonomous and it was clearly observing stuff and reporting back to HQ. And meanwhile, this bigger one was, I think, still being tested because I saw a guy with a remote control actually directing it. This was broadcasting messages on its screen and was telling people to avoid scams and stuff, and overall, police robots in public spaces felt rather odd. And talking of unexpected things, this truck is something that I've never seen before either. Apparently its job is to spray water into the air to get the dust to settle and to improve air quality. Looks fun, and of course it had a green plate, so I guess it's also electric. But hey, Shenzhen is the city of drones, right? It's home to DJI, the largest drone company in the world by far, and also many others. And so maybe it's not surprising that Shenzhen also now does food delivery via drones. And of course I have to try that too. Specifically, there are a few of these giant vending machine looking things in some parts of the city, like in this park at the seaside. There you can get on the Meituan app where you can choose from a list of restaurants and cafes that deliver to there specifically. You wait after placing your order and then eventually a drone shows up with a box, it lands on top of the building, the box detaches and the drone flies away. And then your delivery comes down in a little escalator and is available in this box. Ta-da! Comes in a recycling box. Those are the goods. Now there are instructions for how to get rid of the box. Ding ding. Delivered. Okay, we made it. Our tea/fruit drink from a drone. Cheers. For now, this too seems to be in a pretty early stage as the locals were all treating it like a novelty as well. And the service is also limited to just a few designated spots in the city like these parks where delivery might otherwise be complicated. We actually also managed to find the station where the packages were sent from, and this was in the middle of a busy restaurant area. You can see a regular delivery driver dropping off the food over there, then the orders get put into a drone box of sort, they get attached to a drone, and then they're sent off on their way. Also, it seems like every drone gets a battery swap here after its delivery. Now, I'd personally not necessarily want to have drones buzzing above me all day when I'm trying to chill in a park or something, but still, I gotta say the service worked surprisingly well. We even saw them taking away the drone boxes, which are kind of reusable, so the trash doesn't seem to be much worse than a normal delivery either. Okay, and talking of food delivery, another mind-blowing thing about Shenzhen is that only electric scooters or mopeds are allowed. There are no gas-powered ones at all, which is probably the most important step for fighting noise pollution. All of these scooters are dead silent, apart from their honking, that is. And on the one hand, that is amazing, but on the other, the drivers are also tolerated on the sidewalks, which means you get tons of silent delivery driver e-scooters going full speed in places that people walk, which is also really quite annoying at times. Anyway, these e-scooters are also super popular among normal people, and I met a friend of mine who not only demonstrated hers to me, including its ability to carry her amazingly cute dog, but then she even let me try her scooter as well. First I was just riding around, and then at some point the doggo randomly decided to join me, which really made my day. Oh my god! Hello! Anyway, in many streets there are dedicated scooter lanes like the one that I'm on, which are amazing, but as I said, people ride basically anywhere and it's all chaos. My friend also said that her scooter only cost about $500, which is insane, and this is clearly a super convenient way to get around town for short to medium distances. Interestingly, she said that people were not allowed to charge their scooter batteries at home due to apartment fires in the past, so she also sent me this video.
This is how we charge the bike here. Plug in your charger. You see those stand on the street everywhere by the neighborhood. Just plug it in and then scan this code.
Now, talking of things in public, I've also seen a ton of people leaving their scooters and e-bikes often completely unlocked in public and often even with the key in the ignition at times. Can you guess how that is possible? That's right, Shenzhen has CCTV cameras literally everywhere. That is not an exaggeration. I think there's basically no space outside of private homes and maybe toilets that don't have at least one CCTV camera pointed at it at all times. Like in this clip, you can see what an average metro station looks like, for example. And of course, every part of a public road is full of cameras too, both from overpasses like this one here or cameras on the side. And then there's also this. We are at a very nice little park here in Shenzhen Bay, and everything is nice until you realize there are security cameras everywhere. there, there. Everything has cameras. Surprisingly, public parks actually seem particularly full of cameras, to the point where I think that on average about 3 to 4 of them are looking at you at any given time. Also, every Chinese citizen has to set up facial recognition for just about every service that they use, while as a foreigner you have to have your face scanned when you enter the country, so it's pretty clear that the government has the ability to use face recognition to constantly track basically where everyone is at all times in public, with no exceptions. My friends have also said that they've recently started seeing some people wearing full face masks that hide their identities from facial recognition in public, but I haven't actually seen that myself. Now, that is obviously pretty dystopian, and I don't want to defend the system, and especially if you're somebody who has trouble with the Chinese government, which a lot of people in China do, and these things are not your friends. But then on the other side, there's also some very clear benefits. 10 years ago, people in Shenzhen would still wear their bags in the front like this, because if you didn't, people would steal your stuff. Of course, that is now almost completely gone. At least the perception of petty crime is completely gone, because you can't really steal stuff when everything is constantly on camera. The other day we went to a random store and this guy, super nice guy, helped us out. He left the store to help us out. He left his iPhone unlocked, his bag with all of his valuables on the counter, and he just came back 5 minutes later, didn't even think about it. Nobody thought anything about it, because you can't steal stuff when everything is always on camera. It is kind of like living in one of those Amazon stores where you can just walk in and take whatever you want and walk out and it will bill you automatically. That is the whole country. Everything, all the public space. You can literally see people leaving bikes unlocked at all times, packages unattended at the front desk, and many bizarre things like this. A car store, and there's a paper on the car that says, I've gone out, I'll be back soon. What the hell, this country? This is the car store, and indeed, there's nobody inside. Just a paper that says, I'll be back. Amazing. China is basically at the point where this kind of crime is no longer feasible, but neither is any semblance of privacy. You can't even pay for most things with cash anymore, and you can only use mobile wallets in many places, which of course is also tied to an ID, so you're always leaving a trail. Now, importantly, this is not necessarily a trade-off that I personally approve of, but it is one that has to be mentioned. Now, I also wanted to add a side note here, because I actually managed to spend some time in Beijing after I already finished and edited this video, and that gave me a whole new perspective on all the stuff that I saw in Shenzhen. I last lived in Beijing in 2012, so something like 13 years ago, meaning that the gap between this visit and that was even bigger, but the change in Beijing actually felt way smaller. The city largely felt the same, and all the high-tech stuff that I saw in Shenzhen was clearly years behind. There were noticeably fewer EVs and still some gas-powered buses in some of the places. There were way fewer cameras in public, so you didn't feel constantly surveilled as much, and we even saw a fistfight in a back alley between some drunk dudes, which I guess would have been much harder to pull off in Shenzhen. Clearly, despite even being the capital and also having an on-paper higher GDP per capita than Shenzhen, progress here was way slower, and that's a good reminder that Shenzhen is not necessarily representative of the whole country, but rather one super high-tech island of its own in a way. Anyway, enough of Beijing, and now back to Shenzhen. Now, talking of car shops, I think the car situation I've seen here is also worth talking about in more detail. So Shenzhen is home of BYD, the country's leading electric car maker, and it's also either the richest city in China by now, or pretty close to it, so the cars on the road reflect this reality quite well. You can see about a 50-50 mix of green and blue plates on the road. Green plates in the last few years were only given to pure EVs, while a few years before that they were also given to plug-in hybrids. Meanwhile, the blue plates are everything else, and I found that they typically fall into one of two categories. I often saw blue plates on pretty obviously older cars that were probably bought before the whole current EV boom, or also often on really fancy cars like this Hongqi luxury car, or often also on foreign brands like on Porsches and Mercedeses. Meanwhile, the green plates were on the majority of what I'd consider the kind of normal mainstream new cars. The vast majority of these seem to be local brands like BYD, Li Auto, XPeng, Zeekr, NIO, Xiaomi, MG, GAC, ArcFox, Aito, and so on. And the sheer variety of brands and models is actually quite shocking. Now, Teslas are a fairly common sight in Shenzhen, though countrywide they only have about a 2.9% market share, so I think they're probably overrepresented here. And meanwhile, for Volkswagen, I think I only saw maybe 4 green-plated ID models in about a week, which is surprisingly few given how aggressive their prices have been in China. The ID3, for example, costs about $16,000 in China, which is less than half of what it costs in Germany. But meanwhile, other international brands were perhaps even rarer with their green plates. Usually when I saw a green plate, it was on a car from a Chinese brand, so I think if Chinese consumers consumers choose to go electric, they also typically choose to go domestic. Now, charging is also an interesting topic. Some ride-hailing drivers told me that their apartments have banned EV chargers to avoid any fire risk, while others told me that they can charge at home no problem. I've seen a few public charging networks as well, though many of those already looked somewhat dated, which really shows you that China has been at this for quite a while. But seemingly all the big local brands run their own Tesla supercharger-like networks. I found one parking lot in Shenzhen where there were a lot of them next to each other, and interestingly, they all had these little metal blockers as well. Apparently, cars from the right brand can lower the blockers for their own network, letting them charge, and I've seen a few of them do just that. Some of these also appear to be ultra fast, so this one from Li Auto, for example, claims to be a 5C charger. 5C means that it will fill up a battery at 1/5 of an hour at its peak, which would be in 12 minutes. I think that is a peak charging speed, which then slows down as you get closer to 100, but it's still pretty impressive. Oh, and even faster is Neo, who does battery swaps. And in this station that was here, we saw them do their 3-minute battery swaps. The car enters a sort of self-driving mode where it parks itself into this garage-looking thing. There it gets lifted up, the battery gets pulled out and lowered into the ground, then the new battery goes up and the process is pretty much done. The car even drives itself off the ramp automatically. Very cool, and the next Neo car was already waiting in line when the first one was done. Now, another thing I found very interesting about cars here is just how the retail experience was also so unexpected. We did see an old school parking lot kind of space with a bunch of car stores that felt like what I'm used to from car stores, but then we also saw cars being sold inside just about every shopping mall and shopping street that we were in as well. Now, I've seen a few stores like this in Europe as well, but here they just seem to be as common as stores for clothes or electronics, showing you just how competitive the market has become. And talking of phones, I of course also had to go to some electronic stores, and I found that the Huawei one was the most interesting. I'm sure that you've already heard of their triple fold phone called the Mate XT, and I can confirm that it looks quite surreal in real life. Not exactly my cup of tea with the exposed screen on the outside, and I haven't actually seen any normal person use it on the street myself, but they did sell out apparently, and I did also hear from a friend's father who was feeling very patriotic and bought like 5 of these for a bunch of their family members, so that's something. And then in more futuristic Huawei gadgets, I also saw the world's first smartwatch that can measure your blood pressure. It does that with this tube on the inside that it can inflate to get a reading. Of course, the band then becomes a little bit unwieldy as a result, so this is definitely not for everyone, but still kinda cool. And meanwhile, the following gadgets were also really interesting.
So this is the MatePad Pro, which has a tandem OLED screen that also has a nano texture coating. Super nice. No reflections at all. And the handwriting experience is apparently really nice. And this one is running Harmony OS Next, which is Huawei's own operating system that is apparently not based on Android anymore. So Huawei is going completely the Apple route with own chip, own operating system, own ecosystem, everything.
Now, the retail experiences in Shenzhen are pretty next level in general. This is a hyper-capitalistic city that is very clearly completely obsessed with shopping, and that very much shows with all of its good and bad sides. Most of the retail spaces feel just very nicely put together, and just in general, this whole city was built in the last 40 years or so from scratch, so if you, like me, like modern architecture and skyscrapers and stuff, you might really enjoy how the city feels ultra-modern in general. But on the flip side, everything is extremely commercial, and one bizarre occurrence across the city is that you can see so many influencers influencing in public everywhere. These are typically pretty girls posing for their cameras in the middle of shopping streets or in front of fancy stores, but I've also seen grandmas with their kids posing and doing dances in public for the camera and more. I mean, I can't cast any stones as I'm vlogging out here in public myself, but it definitely felt a little odd. Okay, and moving on to more positive things, since I've told you about every other kind of transportation in Shenzhen, I thought I'd also give you a quick update on what it's like to bike here. The absolute best biking that you can do is on this amazing new recreational bike lane that they recently added along the coastline. My guess is that this goes on continuously for something like 20 kilometers uninterrupted, and the city has basically turned half of its coastline into one gigantic continuous park with a promenade and the fantastic bike lane that I'm on. This is fabulous and a huge upgrade from the last time when I was here, when the bike infrastructure was pretty lacking. Now, in the rest of the city, biking on most roads still felt a little bit terrifying as somebody who's used to European standards. They have started to put up barriers to make protected bike lanes, but I found that there are constantly people walking in these or parking in them, so they felt particularly useless for now. In my experience, Chinese city transformations typically follow the pattern that they first start putting up the infrastructure and then they very gradually start enforcing the rules around it. So my guess is that maybe in 3 or 4 years, biking will have become a little bit easier. For now, though, it still feels fairly adventurous outside of the coastline. Okay, and you might have noticed that a bunch of the most interesting shots in this video, and especially the ones on bikes and scooters, are ones that I got with the Insta360 X4, which is a camera that lets you get shots that no other camera could. For example, I stuck mine on a 3-meter long carbon fiber stick, which the camera could then hide in stitching, so in the final video you get a kind of drone view of yourself that you could reframe as you wish. This is great in cities like Shenzhen, where drones are ironically not permitted or just impractical due to space constraints. And the wide angle allows for insanely good stabilization, so it's especially great for action scenes. The camera can shoot in a combined 8K resolution using both lenses, which is plenty to let you crop in however you want and still get a really high quality output. And selecting the perfect angle is also very easy using the app, which allows you to automatically track subjects, for example, with just one click, and it even lets you tilt and twist the phone around to set what you want to be in focus. And with my link in the description, you can even get an extra good deal on the X4. The first 10 buyers with my link will actually receive a free bullet time accessory worth $65 until the 2nd of March. That is a limited time offer. Insta360 also has lots of other creative cameras like the tiny magnetic Go 3S or the Ace Pro 2, which I recently took diving with me, so I've left links to those below as well. Happy filming, and I'll see you in the next video.